Okay, good morning, friends. So in the previous classes, we discussed about the land preparation, fertilizers, weeds, and their control methods, measures. Then we discussed about the food yielding crops, cereals, millets. Then we discussed about protein givers, that is pulses. We also discussed about the oil yielding crops or seeds, oiled seeds. And in the yesterday class, we discussed about the cash crops and the spices. Of course, both give you money. And in the yesterday's class, we discussed about the methods of sowing, cultivation, irrigation, and intercultivation, and harvest of various crops, starting from sugarcane. We discussed about the cotton. We discussed about tobacco. Then important spices such as chilies, that is red chili. Then we discussed about turmeric, then ginger. Then finally, we also discussed about the coriander. All these we discussed under what we call cash crops, which give financial help for the farmer. Now, of these 6 classes, we so far completed 5 classes, and this is the last class. And in today's class, in the next 1 hour, we'll discuss about orchards, that is fruit yielding crops. Now, generally, fruits, important fruits that are commonly grown across India, especially taking Andhra Pradesh into United Andhra Pradesh into consideration. In syllabus, we have about mango, citrus fruits, cashew nut, and coconut. These 4 important orchards are there for us in syllabus. So we discuss about how to grow them and how to protect the crops and how to do intercultivation and how to harvest them and how best we can enhance the shelf life of various fruits. And coming to cashew nut, where the method of their growing and collection of the seed or the fruit, and what are the various processing methods that are followed in cashew nut. And we also discuss in coconut, and of course, which is very are the most important palm that is grown in India, of course, confined to mostly coastal areas. Both cashew nut and coconut, they are cultivated along east coast and west coast of India. So these 4 crops will do it. Now let us begin with mango. See, the common points regarding all these 4 crops are fruit yielders or nut yielders. Is unlike our fruit crops or cash crops, food crops or cash crops, where the lifespan are generally at the most starting from 3 months to that of 1 year. For example, in a case of sugar cane, it was almost 1 year crop. So also our turmeric, which also takes 7 to 8 months. But unlike them, here this mango, citrus, cashew nut, and coconut, they come for harvest, or they come for flowering, starting from seed implantation or seed germination till the formation of seeds. So this, what we call life cycle, this duration will be in years, not in months. So starting from 5 years to that of 8 years or so, they take, from germination to the fruiting and flowering and fruiting, they take more than 6 years or so. So here, in almost all these cases, the plantation is different. Where we have seen there, the plantation was, dibbling of the seed, or using seed drillers, and you put what we call sowing of the seed. But unlike that, here we make pits. Pits are dig for the plantation of these crops, which stand for years. Say, for example, mango, the traditional varieties, of course. A mango tree lives for more than 100 years or so. Cashew nut, maybe 30 or 40 years. Coconut, maybe 80 to 100 years. So almost all the crops, even citrus, maybe 30 to 40 years, the traditional varieties. So they live in the field for many years. So here, in order to strengthen them, generally, we plant them in pits. And before planting, generally these pits are cleaned of all weeds or maggots of various insects or their eggs, their nymphs, etc. Even white ants, what we call, very dangerous. So you clean, you sanitize the pit in advance, and you take chemicals such as BHC. You put that BHC so that it acts as a insect repellent and cleans or sanitizes the entire pit. So in all four the cases, generally we make pits in advance. You burn the trash, that is leaves or the hay or the stubbles of the previous crop, whatever that is there, dried leaves, etc. You put them in the pit, you burn them. So this burning, leaves makes the pit devoid of any insects and pests. This is one. Then in these cases, generally because they have what we call tree habit, generally here the distance has to be maintained because it is a long-standing tree and it which branches. Except your coconut, all others, they branch and rebranch and flowering takes place. They are like an umbrella, like they spread their foliage. So that's why the distance has to be maintained. The distance between two, trees, fruit yielders or nut yielders, should be more than 6 to 8 feet distance based on the variety. Our traditional varieties are quite spreading, but the new ones, what we go for, new hybrid ones, they are short stature, and the harvest becomes very, very easy. But in spite of that, still they too are to be separated by a distance of 6 to 7 feet. So the field is cleaned and pits are dug and pits are cleaned. Then the previous marking has to be done there. By employing your labor, you make pits ready. Then before that, what do? You raise these crops in a nursery. In all the cases, nursery, then you bring them, you put them. So after cleaning the pit, generally in all the cases, what you do is, generally you mix whatever the soil that is there in the field. Then you get some sand, you get some silt, you mix them thoroughly, or red soil, etc. You mix them so that the small one or the young one or the seedling establishes itself, grows very fast and establishes itself very quickly. That is there. Apart from that, even watering has to be done. So generally here, what we do is, generally generally, unlike our crops where you give flooding, that is irrigation has to be given in the form of floodings. But here, as these are separated one from the other, generally you make basins in the form of rings. So here the water percolates to the base of the tree very slowly. So the tree or the root system should not get inundated. There should not be any stagnation of water. The stagnation of water will damage the base of the stem and also the root system. So this is another common point. Another common point here is because they stand for many years and they are spatially separated one from the other. Here what we do is you go for intercultivation, and wherein you remove whatever the weeds that come up in the meantime, because they stand for many years, So whenever there are showers, maybe your southwest monsoon or northwest monsoon, soon after the monsoon, you will see many grasses and many weeds coming up. So you remove them by employing blade harrow or a country plow. You make you thoroughly intercultivate the medial portion. It leads to what we call thorough mixing, and also it enhances the water holding capacity of the soil. So two important benefits you are getting. So you are by doing intercultivation, by employing blade harrow or a country plow, you are thoroughly mixing the soil, enhancing the water holding capacity so that moisture retention will be there. And the other thing is here you add either compost or farmyard manure. Of course, your chemical fertilizers can be given every year at frequent intervals, or when it is not in flowering and fruiting, that time you can give what we call compost or farmyard manure, and you, by using blade harrow or country plow, you thoroughly send this organic manure you have added deep into the soil. The other important point is intercultivation, or the growing of what we call short duration crops. Here you go for short duration crops because the plant, generally you get you have to wait at least 6 to 7 years for the first crop to come, or between two harvests, there will be more than 6 or 7 months. So some example for in case of coconut or citrus, there of course you may get the fruits at regular, but still you have a lot of time where there is no any fruit. That time, that land which is going unutilized, it can be utilized profitably. It can be utilized profitably by growing certain short duration crops. Certain short duration crops can be grown, and thereby farmer gets additional revenue. So here intercropping means, generally you go for either pulses, maybe your cluster bean, horse gram, lentils, green gram, black gram, or groundnut, or vegetables, maybe your tomato, potato, or instead of potato, tomato, or brinjal, even capsicum can be grown. In Kerala, if you go there, they go for what we call for the growing of even betel nuts, or your what we call palm leaf or pepper, because they are twiners, weak stem. So they can be grown in your coconut orchards there, because you find 6 to 7 feet. So this is how the land that is left over unutilized will be profitably utilized. So these are 3 or 4 important common points for all the crops. So now we will begin. So to begin with, mango, it is considered as the pride fruit of India, and scientists consider India as the birthplace for this mango, especially in the northeastern region is considered as the place from where this mango originated. And this, apart from India, there are many other countries generally which are very near to equator, where tropical. Generally, it is a tropical crop which needs bright sunshine and high temperatures and deep soils. And generally, apart from India, even Southeast Asia, Egypt, South Africa, East Africa, Israel, tropical, Australia, even certain states as Hawaii and Florida in USA, Mexico, Brazil, Cuba. These are some of the countries where mangoes are grown on a larger scale. Now, coming to India, Uttar Pradesh and Andhra Pradesh, Bihar, Bengal. These are the leading mango producing or mango cultivating areas. Now, generally in Andhra Pradesh, generally this ranks, in mango production, in India, Andhra Pradesh ranks almost second in terms of acreage and also in terms of production. Now, in examination, generally they'll ask you to write about various mango varieties that are commonly cultivated in Andhra Pradesh. So you should be able to remember at least 4 or 5 names. So commercial varieties include what we call Banganapalli, Alampur, Suvarnareka, Neelam, Malgova, Pedarasam, Chinnarasam, Navanitam. These are some of the varieties that are very, very popular. Apart from this, in Telangana, especially in Sangareddy, there is a fruit research station where they have produced a high-yielding hybrid variety by name Mahmuda. And if you go to North India, especially in Uttar Pradesh, there is a variety by name Alfonsa, a costly one and highly delicious and highly sought after fruit. That is where a variety of mango, Alfonsa varieties. So, as I told you, this is a tropical or subtropical crop, and generally it loves, generally hot climate, bright sunlight it likes, and generally rainfall should not be there when the plant comes flowering. Generally, this is the flowering time. Generally, flowering starts in the month of January, and you get early fruits in the month of March, as far as mango is concerned. Now, well-drained, I told you, well-drained soils, generally maybe red soils, medium black soils, or even laterite soils are good for raising this one. Now, generally, the mango, mango is raised by using what we call seed. That seed is nothing but the stone. But after removing your pulp, whatever the stone endocarp you get, that is the seed, of course. And generally here, because mango is a cross-pollinated crop, generally you may not get the fruit. Even if you plant the seed from the mother plant, you may not get 10% characters of the mother, because it is a cross-pollinated crop. So to get true mother type of variety, you should go for vegetative propagation. So generally, vegetative propagation is a cumbersome process, and generally you need skill. So that's why we visit either horticulture institutions or fruit research stations where these are available, readily available. So before going them, what you have to do is you have to make your pits ready. Then you get them. Generally, plantation is taken soon after monsoon. Now, after this, before that, what you have to add, I told you, the compost has to be added, and all types of what we call, different types of soils are to be mixed, and that pit is to be filled. And before plantation, you should give light irrigation so that the seedling which you are establishing gets stabilized. Hello. Any query, Ayesha?
Sir? No, sir, no question.
Okay. So now So here now in mango, whenever we speak of mango, no, generally not only for fruits, but even pickle. For pickle also, we make use of these mangoes. Generally, one such famous pickle variety is Jalal is the famous pickle variety that is being used in making pickles. So to mention again, hybrid varieties are Mallika, Amrapali, Ratna is there, A.V. Rumani is there, and Jawahar is there. Then Puneet is there, Manjira. These are some of the high-yielding varieties that are released from various fruit research stations, including that of our fruit research station from Sangareddy. So now here for vegetative propagation, generally we go for what we call grafting. Grafting techniques are there. Generally, in-arching grafting and veneer grafting. These are the 2 or 3 methods that are available for production of vegetatively propagated high-yielding mango varieties. But of course, here 2 things are involved here. The mother plant is known as stalk, and the other, the part which you are grafting is what is known as siam. Stalk and siam are used, and when they get united, then you remove or you defoliate the mother plant and you allow the grafted one to come up. So here, because it needs many years to come up at regular intervals every year, starting from 250 grams per year, the nitrogen, and 100 to 150 grams of nitrogen phosphatic fertilizers, potassic fertilizers are given as the time. In the second year, generally you have to double the amount because the plant grows. So by the time it reaches flowering and fruiting stage, then by that time required the fertilizers are to be given, and regular intervals you have to irrigate that and see that all weeds are removed, and take care of the infestation by various diseases and pests. So then the other thing is generally if you observe very closely, generally you observe what we call fruit drop. Generally fruit drop will be there, though. So fruits of this size only, before even full growth, there is a drop. Fruit drop will be there, and this fruit drop can be checked by spraying what we call auxin, naphthalene acetic acid by 20 ppm dilution. If you spray that, you can check the early fruit drop of mango. So now the mango suffers from number of pests and diseases. To mention few, mango hoppers are there, and shoot webber is there, stem borers are there, and flower webber. So shoot webber, flower webber, stem borer are some of the or mango nut weevil is also there. Then coming to diseases, the diseases are mostly caused by various fungi and also bacteria. Generally powdery mildew is there, and the anthracnose disease is there, and these are and apart from that, you also find what we call leaf spot of mango, so by Pseudomonas, and pink disease is there, pellicularia, then malformation is there, then sooty mold is also there. These are some of the pests and diseases that are commonly encountered in all the mango growing areas. Now, examination point of view, another important question that is being frequently asked is the methods of harvesting and methods of storage and fruit ripening, artificial ripening. They will ask. Now coming to the harvest, generally, how do you identify a generally harvesting season? So the mango matures first, and you observe very closely, on the top, generally, you will see turning of this green to light yellow color. So that shows that the mango is ready for harvest. And you will see, if you visit any mango orchard, then you will see, if you go early morning, you will see fruit fall. Early fruit fall will be there. Of course, matured one, that indicates that the crop is ready for harvest. Now, generally, harvest is taken by fixing a nut at the tip of a bamboo stick, and generally labor is employed to plug them. So after when his net gets filled, generally those mangoes are dropped down and they will not be just thrown on the soil. There is every danger for the breakage. If a mango gets broken, generally it prone for insect and pests, and ultimately it gets spoiled. In order to reduce the damage, generally there are people who take that falling one onto a chadar or anything is spread when that is dropped, so that then it is slowly put on the soil with minimum damage. So after that, generally they are cleaned and they are heaped in an area, and that heap is covered with dry leaves of mango and other, or even rice straw is used to cover, and within 5 or 6 days you will see ripening. And this ripening, of course, you get sweet smell and sweet taste will be there. And if you want to transport it to longer distances, generally you see, so in South India, generally we get in the month of April or so, mango fruit. But in North India, generally it comes in the month of May or June. So people want to shift their produce from South India to North India to catch, early demand there. So because North India generally for travel of by lorry or any other containers, generally it takes 3-4 days travel. So that's why they are harvested, plucked at least 4 or 5 days in advance. After reaching their particular destination, they are unloaded and they are dipped in hot water of 50 degrees centigrade 5 or 10 minutes. Then they are cleaned thoroughly. Then they are smoked, or they artificial ripening by putting calcium carbide. Of course, nowadays it is banned. Generally, you use what we call ethylene releasing ethaphon. By using ethaphon, generally you raise the concentration of ethylene so that the fruits which are rather unripened gets ripened within 2 days or so. So then you can shift them to the market. So this is how. Then comes what we call storage. Generally storage, you cannot store the ripened mangoes for more than 3 or 4 days, keeping them at house temperature. So you can enhance the shelf life of these mangoes by putting them in cold storage. By putting them in cold storage, where the temperature will be around 5 or 6 degrees, thereby they can be stored for 2 or 3 weeks more. Then the other thing is by skin coating with wax. They are dipped in wax solution, and a very thin, maybe 1 mm or less than 1 mm uniform coating of wax takes place, so that it checks the availability of the oxygen, thereby enhancing the shelf life. The other is there are certain storage facilities where the air is controlled, where instead of oxygen, their carbon dioxide concentration is more, so that the rate of respiration is kept at low. Thereby you can enhance its shelf life. So here, harvesting and storage and artificial ripening. These three are generally frequently asked in exam. So artificial ripening, plucking generally, you clean in hot water, then you smoke it or put calcium carbide or ethaphon. Thereby your green colored mango becomes attractive yellow. So this is what we call artificial ripening and storage. Then we move to the second one, that is citrus. So in citrus, whenever we speak of citrus, generally citrus can be grown both in tropics and subtropics. Temperate regions are also congenial for raising this citrus. But as far as India is concerned, generally citrus crops, generally we take the citrus, especially in Maharashtra, parts of Karnataka, and Andhra Pradesh, of course. Andhra Pradesh, where in India, it ranks almost second position after Maharashtra as far as citrus is concerned. So whenever speak of citrus, apart from India, even it is grown in USA, Mexico, Argentina, Italy, Spain, Israel, South America, South Africa, Algeria, Egypt, Russia, and New Zealand. So almost all the areas, because it comes up well both in tropics and subtropics, and to certain extent in temperate areas. So that's why it is grown across the world. Now, in India, as I already told you, Maharashtra ranks first and Andhra Pradesh ranks second. And whenever we speak of this Andhra, generally this Rayalaseema area is famous for citrus fruits. So generally, Anantapur, Kadapa, Kurnool, these are the Chittoor are the districts. And apart from this, even Nellore and Guntur districts where the citrus cultivation is taken up on a large tracts. Even Godavari districts are also famous for this citrus orchards. So whenever we speak of citrus, we think of three. One is Mosambi, the other is Santra, and the third one is what we call Nimbu. So these are the three important citrus fruits generally, which are popular and which are grown in India. So as far as our area, that is United Andhra, is concerned, here we take up what we call Mosambi and Nimbu. Santra, of course, whenever we speak of Santra or oranges, generally the Nagpur area is famous for Nagpur Santra. So how do you differentiate between this Mosambi and Santra? Of course, you know that generally the Santra, generally removal of this rind is a little bit difficult. But in Mosambi, the removal of the epicarp and mesocarp is a little difficult. Whereas in Santra, or what we call oranges, is very easy. And generally the rind, the epicarp is shining in case of Santras. Even it is oily. People or students play with them, oily. So the Santra, the Mosambi, and the Nimbu. Generally, Andhra area where this, generally terminology is rather confusing. So you remember Mosambi, Santra, of course, Nimbu, no confusion. So generally, this Mosambi is otherwise some areas it is called sweet orange. In Telugu, it is what we call Kamalal. So sweet orange is there, and generally Citrus sinensis is the scientific name, and of course Rutaceae, and our Citrus aurantium. Citrus aurantium is or Citrus reticulata is the scientific name for oranges. And Santra. And of course, Citrus aurantifolia is our Nimbu. Of course, the climatic requirements are almost same. Generally, it is tropics to temperate region, I told you. And generally, soils need not be very, very rich for raising this citrus. So generally, slightly, it requires loose soils or saline soils. Of course, saline are not, generally not convenient for raising this, but generally the soils which are, deep enough, maybe 2 meters or so, between 2 meters, at the end of the 2 meters, if a water table is there, that area is convenient. And generally the dry areas of Rayalaseema. Generally, if you go to even in Telangana, generally the Nalgonda area, where the cultivation of this citrus is taken up on a large scale. So those areas generally they have, temperature will be maybe 25 to 30 degrees centigrade, and that is good for raising this crop. And it doesn't need very deep soils, but the subsoil should not be hard pan. If it is very hard, it prevents the spreading of the root system that is there. So now, generally here also, it is also a cross-pollinated crop, and generally here also nursery is raised. So nursery is raised by using, you have to select the fruits, nimbu fruit, for example, and other cases also. You select the nimbu fruit, which is devoid of any pathogen, and even the tree should be very healthy. And from that, say, you collect fruits and collect the seeds from them. Then you use these seeds to raise your nursery. But here also, same, this vegetative propagation is observed. The vegetatively propagated high-yielding varieties are available in various fruit research stations and horticultural stations. From there, you can go and get your seed material in the form of seedlings, and which you can plant them in already readily prepared pits. So here also generally, before you put the seedling, as I already told you, generally those seed pits are to be well cleaned, and sand should be added, and silt brought from nearby tanks, and red soil, etc., are thoroughly mixed. And you also add the organic manure, that is farmyard manure, compost, etc., that should be added, and that pit has to be treated with BSC, etc., so that it kills the insects, eggs, or the larvae, which if present in that area. So now here, because it comes for harvest, after the plantation of after 4 to 5 years after plantation. So meanwhile, generally every year you should give manure. Apart from organic manure, you should also give these nitrogen, nitrogic, phosphatic, and potassic fertilizers at regular intervals, and you should go on increasing the dosage. Generally, the nitrogen fertilizers are given in split doses, whereas potassic and phosphatic fertilizers are given at one go. So now I told you generally intercropping, generally weeds. So intercropping involves mixing of the soil and removal of the weeds, if any, and it helps in removal of the soil and also removal of the weeds, and it enhances the water holding or moisture holding capacity of the soil. So generally, I told you the early growing pulses such as cowpea or pillipesara, gingerly, or generally can be grown. Of course, vegetables like your pumpkin, turnip, cauliflower, carrot, radish, etc. can also be taken up when the tree is not in flowering and fruiting stage. So generally, the another thing generally, because if you go to the Rayalaseema area or Nalgonda area, generally the soils are drier areas. They are very likely to lose their moisture from the soil. So plants may suffer from moisture stress. So to avoid that, what we do is you go for what we call mulching. So mulching is a practice of spreading the dry leaves or the paddy straw on the surface of the soil, so that the moisture that is there in the soil does not get evaporated. And by mulching, you not only enhance the soil retaining, moisture retaining capacity, but by mulching, you also get rid of the weeds. You are covering the weeds with mulching. Generally the weeds suffer from sunlight. They don't get sunlight. That's why they get eliminated. So here, this suffers from like other crops. Here also you find the citrus. Generally, all the three, that is Mosambi, Santra, and also your lemon, the sweet or lime, what we call nimbu, they suffer from what we call citrus butterfly, orange borer is there, citrus leaf miner is there, and citrus mite. These are the insects that cause a lot of damage to the citrus orchards. Now, citrus also suffers from certain bacterial and fungal diseases. Fungal diseases include pink disease is there, powdery mildew is there, and gummosis. Generally, this gummosis and citrus canker, these are caused by bacteria. Gummosis is nothing but some white liquid oozes, oozing of the liquid. If you find oozing of the liquid from the areas, from the stem or from other areas, you can come to a conclusion that that is a bacterial disease. And generally, a citrus canker, as you know, citrus canker, it forms spots, leaf spots, and also on the branches, even on the mature stem. You will see here also this oozing, and generally even on the fruit you will see certain raised structures. They are nothing but what we call cankers, and if you scrape that canker, you will find necrotic or dead cells beneath that canker. So citrus canker is another, and this gummosis, these are caused by bacteria, and powdery mildews is caused by a fungus.
Sir,
so
important
then
question.
Of course harvesting generally, as far as this Mosambik and the Santra is concerned, generally you get every quarter or for every three to 4 months you get one crop. So generally you get this is the season from December to March 1, thereafter March, April, May, June, again September, October, November. So these are the at 3 times you get your produce, your Mosambik, and generally of course Santra, generally the season starts Nagpur Santra in summer. But of course our Nimbu, what we say, Nimbu is available throughout the year. Nimbu is available throughout the year, and generally in some areas, from each plant, from each tree, you get something like 3,000 to 4,000 Nimbu, and each Nimbu will be weighing something like 40 to 50 grams. So now, after harvest, what you have to do? You have to grade them, and you have to for enhancing their shelf life. Generally, you go for storing in cold storage, or you go for wax. So we will think of that question paper at the end. You wait for another 20 minutes or so. So generally, see this either storing in the cold storage or covering the surface with what we call wax lining enhances the shelf life of this Nimbu, or what we call acid lime. This is another. So Citrus aurangifolia is the scientific name of our Nimbu. Then we move to the third one, that is cashew nut. Of course, cashew nut. This cashew nut, another very important crop after hazelnut and almonds. This occupies the third position as far as the importance, as far as the revenue it generates. Generally, of course, India ranks first in the cashew nut production. The cashew nut production, India ranks first, and its scientific name, as you know, Anacardium occidentale is the scientific name of this cashew nut. And of course, it belongs to South American. Brazil is considered as the birthplace of this, and it was introduced to India by Portuguese in 16th, 17th centuries, especially in the west coast. Of course, later on it spread to east coast also. Now, generally, this cashew nut and coconut, both generally they are grown along the coast. The humid and temperature will be more than 26 or 27 degrees temperature, and a humid climate and gentle blowing winds are very common on the coastal areas. And these are the climatic conditions which both cashew nut and our coconut prefer. Now this cashew nut, cashew nut is grown apart from India. Apart from India, it is grown, it is found growing in Brazil and South American, and also many areas such as many countries, where this is grown, and even Madagascar is there, Brazil, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, Nigeria, Sri Lanka are the leading cashew nut producing countries. Of course, the Tanzania, Mozambique, and Kenya, Brazil, they account for more than 50% of the production from other countries. But of course, India ranks first as far as production and also in the acreage is concerned. Now, this cashew nut, cashew nut is primarily grown for its kernels. Kernels, very sweet kernels, and they are used variously by frying and adding salt. They are very tasty, and they are used in making even sweets, etc. In almost all the preparation, generally we use in upma making, in sweet preparations, generally you use cashew nuts. Now they are very rich, and cashew nuts are very rich as far as food ingredients are concerned. They are rich in carbohydrates, proteins, fats, and very rich in minerals and vitamins. So that's why they are preferred. And even doctors, nowadays after our COVID, doctors advise you, that is, you take almonds, 3-4 almonds or 3-4 cashew nuts daily. That keeps you fit. So in India, generally, Kerala is the leading producer of this cashew nut. Apart from Kerala, generally this Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, especially Andhra, even Orissa and some parts of Bengal, where the cashew nut cultivation is taken up on a large scale. And in United Andhra Pradesh, of course, Telangana, generally we don't take up this cashew nut. We don't have any coastal areas. Generally, coastal areas, sandy soils are preferred by this crop. We don't have that type of soils in Telangana, so generally we don't take up that. And in Andhra, generally starting from Srikakulam, Vijayanagaram, Visakhapatnam, East West Godavari, and Guntur and Nellore. So along the coast, from north to south coastal area, you will see these cashew nut orchards. And generally, the cashew nut processing units are there in East Godavari, West Godavari, at a place what we call Mori, and in Srikakulam, there is a place called Palasa, which is famous for the cashew nut production. And as far as Prakasham district is concerned, there is one place called Vetapalem, where a number of the cashew nut processing industries are there. Now here, the Bapatla, where there is a research station, and it released 4 or 5 high-yielding varieties which are suitable for this coastal Andhra area. So climatic requirements, of course, I told you it's a tropical crop, and generally it comes up well between 15 to 40 degrees centigrade, of course, which is available on the coastal areas only. So generally, cashew nut requires deep, well-drained, sandy, loamy soils, and of course, hard pan is not preferred here. And well-drained, loamy soils are well preferred by this, and generally the water table should be below. If it is below 3 meters, that is good for raising this cashew nut. Now, generally here also 2 types of the mode of propagation is there. Generally, both raising through seeds, and the other is by vegetative propagation. By same grafting technique is used, because this is also cross-pollinated. This is also cross-pollinated. To get true type of its mother plant, generally you go for what we call the vegetatively propagated plants. And here also what we do is, you take the seeds. Of course, I hope you might have seen. So here, what we find, an apple-like structure. Of course, you learned, in intermediate, a false fruit. You learned false fruit. So where there is a false fruit, when the pedicel becomes fleshy, and the nut is the really true fruit. Nut is the really true fruit. Of course, that
Yes, sir.
apple-like juicy one generally we don't use, but especially in Goa area, this from that a type of alcoholic drink by name Feni is fermented, and which is people generally, these tourists prefer this Feni, which almost it costs you equal to that of Scotch whiskey. So generally, but of course in other areas generally, this apple, which is rather stringent, of course, not that tasty, of course, you can take one or two, not more than that. That apple goes waste here. So here the important part is that nut, what we call the seed. So these seeds are collected. The seeds are collected, and generally, if you take the seed, which is fresh one, freshly harvested fruit from freshly harvested seed, if you move it, it will not give you any sound, because the epicarp, mesocarp, and the endocarp are fruit seed, wall and the seed wall are joined. That's why they do not make any sound. When it gets dried, the seed separates from the fruit, and you will be able to hear the sound. So in order to enhance, you don't wait for keeping that in hot sun for months together. So here we go for a process what we call processing. Processing is a method of extracting the kernel from the nut. You extract the kernel, which is the sweet part, from the kernel, is what we call processing. And this processing, it involves a time-consuming and process wherein this processing involves what we call three or four steps. One is what we call roasting, shelling, drying, peeling, grading, sweating, and packing. So this is important as far as your exam is concerned. They'll ask you, write briefly about the processing of cashew nut. So generally harvesting, of course, generally it comes for harvest. This is the time, generally the harvest or the fruit or the nut comes for maturity starting from February to May. So generally when it drops, generally women or laborers are employed to collect them, and they separate this flesh part from the nut. And generally these, after the collection, these nuts are processed, which I told you involves 4 or 5 steps. First one is roasting, then shelling, then drying, then peeling, then grading, then sweating, and last one is packing. This is very, very important as far as exam is concerned. Now, generally, what does it mean? What do you mean by roasting? So generally, in order to separate the kernel from the fruit wall, hard shell, in order to separate the kernel from the hard fruit. So this is nothing but, like our, assume as if your fresh groundnut is there. Fresh groundnut, even if you move it, you don't get any sound. When it gets dried, then you will able to hear the sound. Here also, initially, the fruit wall and seed wall are joined. When it dries, they get separated. So here what we do, by doing roasting, here roasting involves, heating the nuts over a fire. Generally, it will be done by 3 methods. One is what we call open pan method is there. Second one is rotating drum roasting. Third one is oil bath. So generally, in open pan method, a big pan, iron pan with holes like your sieve is there, and this will be kept on the fire, and into that container, these harvested nuts are kept, and in 10 to 15 minutes, they get roasted, And because they have oil, that comes out, and it falls into the fire in the form of drops, and that oil is inflammable. Soon after, your nuts get they catch fire, and then you have to immediately remove that and put it on the soil and douse the fire. So second one, in rotating method, here there is a drum. The drum is kept over the fire, and by using a handle, you go on rotating. Here, even the drum also, you have, pores. You put the nuts from one opening, and you move on rotating this. So when the nuts move from one end to the other end, here also they catch fire, and then again they are put on the soil and doused. Then finally is here in oil bath, generally the temperature. So in both the cases, generally in open pan and roasting method, there the temperature would be around 100 to 1 or 110 degrees centigrade. But as far as this oil bath is concerned, here the oil of the seed is used as a fuel here, and generally the temperature rises to 190 to 200 degrees centigrade. At high temperatures, the seed is roasted, and within 2 or 3 minutes it catches fire. So here you get, here in the first two cases, you are losing the precious oil, but here you will, at least you will be able to save 50% of the oil from the nuts. And this oil, this what we call CNSL, cashew nut shell liquid, CNSL, and this liquid is used in making paints, varnishes, and it can also be used for what we call brake liner, and also as a coating for over the big logs. So these are some of the uses of this CNSL. So then what we do is, second one is, so you roast it. So after roasting, you get the loosened or dried shell. Now second one is shelling. Shelling means nothing but breaking the shell into two pieces. Then you will see the kernel buried deep in the shell. So by using either a wire or a nail, you take it out. So taking out of this kernel from the shell is what we call shelling. Then drying. After taking out, you dry them. Here the drying involves, generally the kernels are put in a chamber which has a temperature of 80 to 90 degrees centigrade. Maybe for 3-4 hours it is kept at that high temperature. Then the kernel, the kernel has a pinkish thin layer, like our what we call peanuts, like your palli, which has pinkish layer is similar. Here also you will find a pinkish thin layer, and that will be, after drying, that will be removed. Then that removal of this thin pinkish layer is what we call peeling. That removal is called peeling. Then you go for grading. So here grading, when you beat it, when you separate it, when you remove the peel, in due course what happens, there is every possibility for the breakage of nuts. So some are whole, some are split, and some are broken. So based on there, that they are graded 1, 2, 3 like this. Then you go for what we call sweating. So here the sweating, there is every possibility, because after drying, they get brittle. So there is while packing and marketing, there is every possibility for the breakage. To lessen this, what we do is, you put these harvested or removed kernels in chambers where humidity of 80 to 90 is maintained, so that these dried kernels absorb moisture, thereby they lose their brittleness. So after keeping them under fan or open for some time, then they are packed. This packing is what we call Vita pack method, wherein they are put in containers, and from that the air is removed, vacuumized, what we call vacuumized, and into that some amount of carbon dioxide is put into the container so that the shelf life of the nuts gets enhanced. So this is what we call the processing, the old process. This what we call processing. Processing is very, very important. Then, of course, I told you these nuts are very highly nutritious. They are taken, without salt or with salt, and with sweet. Of course, rich, I told you, carbohydrates, vitamins, and even minerals and vitamins. They have minerals and vitamins. Now, generally, this shell liquid, I already told you, used as a resin, as a varnish, as a paint, as an brake liners, and also wood preservative. Then, of course, I told you this cashew apple, especially in Goa, because it is rich in vitamin C, and these liquid or these apples are fermented, and from that a liquid, a whiskey-like alcoholic drink by name Feni is prepared. Then we move to the last one, that is our coconut. Now coconut, coconut is considered as what we call kalpa vriksha. This is known as kalpa vriksha, and this lives for maybe 50 to 100 years or so, depending on the variety. It stands for 100 years or so, and generally it is also it loves coastal environment. So that's why these coconut plantations are you find only along the coast, along the east coast and west coast you will find. And of course, this is Cocos nucifera is the scientific name, and Palmae or Ericaceae is the family. Generally, this is grown in all the coastal areas. Generally, in Philippines, Indonesia, India, Thailand, Malaysia, and Fiji, Africa, America, West Indies. These are the areas where the coconut orchards or coconut plantations are taken up on a large scale. And in India, of course, both in the east coast and west coast. East coast starting from Assam to that of Tamil Nadu, and in the west coast starting from Gujarat to Kerala on the west coast, you find the coconut plantations. And of course, as far exam is concerned, this here you get frequent questions on varieties, tall and dwarf varieties. Generally, primarily the coconut, they are divided into two based on their stature: long varieties or tall varieties, and the dwarf varieties. So tall are, generally tall, as the name indicates, they grow up to 30 meters, whereas short are 5 meter high. And generally the tall ones live longer. They live for 80 years or so, whereas short ones half, that is 40 to 45 years. And generally the tall ones go for cross pollination, where the short dwarf high yielding varieties, they go for what we call self pollination. And generally for the maturity, the tall ones take 6 to 8 years, whereas the dwarf ones, they come for harvest or they come for fruiting 3 to 5 years or so. 3 to 5 years. And generally number of nuts, generally in tall varieties, number of nuts will be 60 to 80, and in dwarf ones, of course, 60 will be there. And the tall ones, the copra, what we call the endosperm. The endosperm content is more, and the amount of oil you get from that copra will be large. And whereas these dwarf ones, they are primarily grown for the drink. Coconut milk, generally which we prefer in the tender nuts. Generally, you go for this milk as the temperatures goes up, especially in April and May, where the temperatures shoot up. Generally, we go for these tender coconuts, which are rich in this nutritious drink. So they'll ask you the difference between tall and dwarf. These are the 5 or 6 points you can mention. Then the tall varieties in west and east coast, we have, tall varieties are what we call the west coast tall, east coast tall, and the Lakshadweep tall. So three tall varieties are there. On the west coast, of course, I told you, on the banks of your Arabian Sea, on the east, Bay of Bengal, east coast, west coast. So the west coast tall and the east coast tall and the Lakshadweep tall. So almost all the characters are same, very lengthy and fruiting will be there, and 60 to 8 and long. The lifespan is very large. They live for 80 years or so. So here, the dwarf ones, generally characterized by their short stature, I told you. Generally, here, the dwarf ones are, again, we have two varieties. One is Chauga dwarf and the Ganga Bonda. On the west coast, generally, the dwarf one is known as Chaugat dwarf. And east coast, generally, in Andhra, generally, you get what we call Ganga Bonda. Both are grown for their nuts, the liquid, generally. These. And generally, the climatic requirements, I told you, it loves, tropical climatic conditions. Generally, hot and moist conditions and light breezes are preferred by the coconuts. And generally, if if the soils, well drained and red, maybe sandy, loamy soils are very preferred by these coconuts. And generally, the pH of the soil ranges it tolerates from 7 to 8 pH. It tolerates. However, stagnation it doesn't like. So that's why, because they are mostly grown in sandy areas, generally there is no question of stagnation. In sandy areas, the stagnation is not, the water either percolates down or moves away. So no stagnation is possible in sandy areas. So now propagation, similarly. So generally it's also a cross-pollinated, but mostly generally coconut seeds, what we call nuts. So after harvesting, there you have to take precautions. But here, these nuts, generally people like your toddy. So here also people are there. And of course, if you go to Kerala and other, even Tamil Nadu area, mechanized machines are there. They go up and harvest the mature nuts. But here in some area, generally people are employed and they climb the tree and pluck the harvested nuts. So of course, if they fall also, nothing will happen. Well protected. The nut is well protected and nothing happens to the embryo that is there, deeply seated in the endosperm. So now, generally here the nurseries are raised. So generally nuts are the coconuts are collected from the plants which are 30 or 40 years and which do not have any health problem, that is not infected either by the insects or the pests, healthy ones. From that, these coconuts are collected and they are preserved, and generally they are put in the sand for a week or so. And it takes almost 3 to 4 months for the sprouting of the bud or the seed coconut. So coconut comes out, the plumule and the radicle comes, it takes a lot of time. So generally 3 to 4 months time by the time the coconut germinates and gives out its 2 or 3 leaves. So generally it is a common practice, generally where in the first week of June, etc., you will see people selling these coconut saplings. So generally they are raised in nurseries, and generally when they sprout, when 3 or 4 leaves come out, generally at that time, generally they are supplied to the farmers who are interested in planting. So here the farmer has to prepare the pits in advance. So whenever he gets his material, generally he has to plant them. He has to put them in the pit and cover that. So here the pit, apart from there, here he has to. So here he has to put. Generally, we put what we call ash, you put coir, you put lime, you put compost, etc. are added here. Especially this coir, coir has the ability to absorb water and retain. So the young seedlings, they are very sensitive to water stress. So if you put in this coir in the pit, if you water it, it retains and supplies the water for the growing seedling very slowly. And you add lime, you put even BHC powder, etc. And even you put what we call um, the the powder of a bone powder or bone meal, what we call bone meal is also added, and it requires potash also in larger quantity. So that's why as it grows, because it takes 4 or 5 years for flowering. So during that time, generally you have to give these potassic, nitrogenic, and phosphatic fertilizers at regular intervals so that your crop comes up well. So here generally intercultivation is taken up, generally tillage is taken up with either a country plow or the blade harrow, etc., to remove and to up and down, or for thorough mixing of the soil. And you also get rid of the weeds. And generally, like in other crop, generally you go for what we call green manuring, because it stands for years together. Generally you grow like green gram or pilli pesara or jute, etc. You raise them to a height of this, and then you, by using plow, you incorporate that green foliage in the soil. In due course, it gets decomposed and adds to the fertility of the soil. So you can add, you can go for farmyard manure, etc. Compost you can go for, and regular intervals, this nitrogenic and phosphatic and potassic fertilizers are added. And generally, because it stands for many years, and the distance between two trees is very large, maybe 9 to 10 meters apart from each other, that 10 meters goes waste, that land. So here you can grow for, crops such as what we call pineapple, tapioca, banana, and dry rice, millets, pulses. You can go for them. You can go for the raising of these pulses and vegetables in the coconut orchards. So now, why this coconut is so in another 5 minutes I'll be completing. So Tehseen, wait for another 5 minutes. Generally, why, of course I told you why this coconut is considered as a kalpa vruksha. Generally, kalpa vruksha means every part of the tree is useful. Now, no part of the coconut tree goes waste. Starting from its stem, its roots, its leaves, and its fruits, its coir, its endocarp, its copra, every part is useful. Even its inflorescence, leaf bases, every part is useful. That's why it is known as kalpa vruksha, kamadhenu and kalpa vruksha. And of course, in Hindu philosophy, generally, this goes, kalpa vruksha means which kalpa vruksha and kamadhenu, whatever you beg, whatever you prefer, you get it. That is the meaning of that. So every part of it is used. That's why, because it gives you food, it gives you shelter, and it gives you drink. You get your broom, etc. You get your carpets. You get your decorative materials, and these endocarp used as a coal. It gives you. It can also be used as a fire giver. So the husk you get, that can be put in the coconut pits, and some parts can be used as a mulching material. So that's why, as every part is used, that's why it is called a kalpa vruksha. Even the copra, what we call, this is very rich in carbohydrates, fats, and vitamins A, B, C, D, E are present in it. And the oil, generally except in Kerala, in all the areas, generally coconut, from coconut, generally you use in making your chutneys, your curries, we use this fresh copra. But the dried one, that is used for extracting of what we call coconut oil. Generally, we use that oil as hair oil and making soaps in our area as a lubricant we use. But if you go to Kerala, there the coconut oil is used as what we call where this is used for as a sweet oil for food cooking oil. And even now, after people, many doctors, especially after this COVID, they are advising us to go for coconut for making our food preparations. So I told you the coir, whatever the coir, that coir is nothing but mesocarp. The epicarp and mesocarp is the coir. From that you get rope making, you get what we call the carpets, mattresses, decorative items, and even the coir dust, that can be used as a moy, as a manure, also as a soil conditioner. And the coconut shells, what we call endocarp, is used as a fuel, and also in manufacturing of what we call hookah shells and domestic utensils and ashtrays, flower vases, etc. Are making you use, and the stems, the leaf bases, etc. are used as firewood. So even after burning, whatever the ash you get, that is very rich in potash, that can be used in fields. It is useful for raising for almost all types of crops. Now the coconut suffers from certain pests. One is rhinoceros beetle is there, and black-headed caterpillar is there, red palm weevil is there, and it suffers from bud rot, trunk rot is there, stem bleeding is there, and Tatipaka disease. These are some of the diseases which the coconut suffers. So with this, we have completed the syllabus. Of course, we had to rush through because it requires, it requires at least 20 or 25 classes for the completion of this. And because of the changed module, changed program, and we are supposed to complete this, only in just 6 classes. That's why I had to rush through. And generally, some were asking about, generally questions. What I advise you is generally you take the previous question papers, 2 or 3 previous question papers, and if you go through them very closely, so whatever the question that is getting repeated, generally take that as an important question and prepare for that. And one more thing, what I feel to say is that generally the failures as far as this crop production is concerned are very, very meager. So, and the time is up, and we are getting a question. So what I advise you is generally these fertilizers are there, and generally various food crops generally you get, generally this mirchi you get, and generally the mango. I told you while discussing, I told you, see, when in all my classes I am giving now and then the questions that are very, very important as far as your exam is concerned. Okay, don't worry, generally the failures are very, very minimum, and you will understand very easy to write this paper as far as this crop production is concerned. And with this, because time is up, I cannot continue anymore. Still, if you have any doubt, Ayesha Begum and Taisin, in 2 or 3 minutes, I'll be in a position to answer if you raise any query as such.
Sir, pass marks, sir, how many?
Ayesha?
Pass marks.
Pass marks, similarly. So because here the paper, as you know, it may be for 70. So generally 25 marks, I think. If it is 70, generally it will be for 25. If it is 80, it may be 30, I think.
32.
So only, so need not worry as far as this paper is concerned. Don't get worried, and keep 2 or 3 previous papers before you, and check for the repeated questions and prepare them.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay,
Okay.
sir.
Thank you.
Okay.
All the
Thank you, sir.
best. Don't worry. Right. Bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Nice. Thank you.